Hey guys, Tucker Antell here with the Tucker's tutorial video. Today's video is going to be a bit longer and more in depth into a concept involving some jazz theory that I find super useful for myself to think about to help me play some things that I wouldn't normally play, and also super essential for those of you who are learning to read and improvise over chord progressions. These videos can be found on my website at tuckerantell.com under tutorial section, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel for updates and more videos like this one. So this is a concept I like to call 2-5 buddies. On the left-hand column are all the what we would call 2 chords or minor 7 chords, and on the right hand are the dominant chords or what we'd call the 5 chords. If you've never heard of 2-5-1s before, this might not be the best introductory video, but hang in there and I think you're going to enjoy some of these examples. It's essential to be able to recognize these relationships when you see them on the page. They appear so often together. And they're actually pretty much the same chord. They come from the same parent scale, so they have the same chord scale. And as we're going to find out, there's a minor chord embedded in every dominant chord anyways. This can be super useful for looking at chords in different angles and maybe getting a shortcut to playing upper structure triads. So what am I talking about here? Well, if we write out a G7 all the way up to the 13, you can see that if we start on the D, you're already playing a D minor 7, at least up to the 9, inside of that G7. So they're really kind of the same chord depending on how you look at it. Now, some people might say, well, I like to think of that as the 5, 7, 9, 11, 13. But there are some things that you play over minor chords that you might not play if you were thinking, oh, these are the upper structure triads. We're going to find some cool examples coming up. Another way that this can help a lot is to just sort of compartmentalize really fast chord progressions as they're going by and make it a little bit easier to sight read. Let's look at one of my favorite tunes, which is Eternal Triangle by Sonny Stitt. This is Sonny Stitt's solo over the bridge, at least one of the choruses he takes. And you can see that there's a chord for every 2 beats. They're going by very quickly. But hopefully, if you understand this relationship, the 2-5 buddies, you can recognize very quickly that those are 2 5s. That's one harmony, that's one chord scale, that's one thing. And Sonny Stitt is using that to great effect because he's playing basically just a bebop scale over both of those chords. And then when that progression goes down by a half step, he plays the same thing down a half step and then down another half step for the A minor 7, D7. By playing one thing over the 2 chords instead of having to play one individual thing for every 2 beats, it makes it a little bit easier to think about, and then he ends up bringing out the chromatic progression as it goes down. So he plays sort of an E7 bebop scale for the first bar, then goes down a half step, then plays the full bebop scale all the way down on the D bebop scale on the tenor. So that can be a really cool way to think about 2 5s when you're looking at them, is to just think of them as just one entity, one chord. Choose one. You can either play the 2, play the B minor, the B flat minor, the A minor, or play just the 5s, E7 to E flat 7 to D7. You're not missing out on anything. In fact, it's sort of just making things a little bit simpler. Another way that you can do that is to, some would say, substitute, although I don't really like that word because it's not really substituting since it's kind of the same thing. It's really looking at the same harmony from a different angle. This right here we're looking at is Dexter Gordon's solo over the bridge of Apple Jump, which is another rhythm changes tune. And if this lick were not labeled with an E7, you might think it's actually something else. Sounds an awful lot like B minor is the home of this lick. And of course, as you might remember, B minor is the 2-5 buddy of E7. So there is a B minor that's living inside of an E7. Now, who knows whether Dexter was thinking, oh, I'm going to play the upper extension of E7, or I'm going to kind of make a little bit of an adjustment and think about this as just B minor. But either way, I think it would be a lot easier to think of that lick and play some of your minor sounding licks over a dominant chord if you really, really know this relationship and bring out those notes, and ends up sounding really great. Because I, for one, don't always think of B minor when I look at E7, but when you do, some really cool results happen. Another example of this is over Stan Getz' solo on the tune Parker 51. Parker 51 is just Cherokee with a new melody on it. We call that a contrafact. When he gets to his F major 7, and this tune is very, very fast, he's repeating this really fast eighth note line here, and it's outlining an F major 7 really beautifully. You can tell it's F major 7, and it kind of uses what we call a major bebop scale. Then we go up a fourth to the dominant 4 of the F. And instead of moving the lick up a fourth, he stays put where he is and just changes the A to an A flat, of course, to get the flatted 7th of the B flat 7. Now it sounds an awful lot like an F minor lick. So we go from major to minor. So that's a neat little trick to be able to go from a 1 chord to a 4 chord and just change one note and keep the lick the same so that you're kind of bringing out that change instead of moving the whole thing into another place. That, of course, you might be familiar with from playing over blues progressions, and that's very, very true. We can take a look at Sonny Rollins' tune, Tenor Madness, for example, where we have the major third being played over the 1, and then when we get to the 4 chord, it changes to an E flat, which from C's perspective is the minor third, so it's kind of like we went major to minor. Of course, you could also just interpret that as we play the minor 7 over the F7 chord, which is also correct. Again, this is just a different angle on the same harmony. Of course, and it sounds like this. So you have that sort of fighting between the major and the minor, and that battle that exists in a lot of blues solos and a lot of blues heads. This happens in a lot of different tunes. Another one that comes to mind is Blues in a Closet by Oscar Pettiford. This is an F, and we keep the same shape and the same spot, only changing the notes as necessary. So we're in major and then we're in minor, even though the whole lick went up a fourth. Now, that's one of the reasons I really like to think about this, because sometimes you might look at an F7 and think, oh, I'm in F7. And then you might see a B flat 7 and you say, oh, I got to jump up a fourth, right? But then the melody would end up sounding like this. Which also sounds great, but it's just another angle of looking at the same chords. So back to Sonny Rollins' Tenor Madness. If we look at his opening solo at A, he's also utilizing this same concept of just kind of staying put in the same place. He's in C major. This is the tenor key we're looking at. And then he just changes the notes as needed and basically plays what I put in red there, an inverted C minor triad when he gets to the 4 chord, which sounds like this. So all of a sudden we go from to, and of course it's all just the same thing. I mean, you could say, yeah, he's playing the flatted 7th of the F7 chord, or you could say he's playing the flatted 3 of the C. But either way, being aware of that gets you to those results. There's one final example I wanted to look at, and that involves sort of, well, what happens if I want to play some alterations to these notes, and I want to play a sharp 11, or I want to play a flat 13, etc., etc. Well, that's a really cool result as well. If we look at Hank Mobley's solo over, I think this is Dig, he's on an F7 chord, and he arpeggiates right up into the upper structure using a B natural. Now, traditionally you'd say, okay, yeah, that's a sharp 11, and he's going all the way up to the 13, and you'd be right. But that also sounds a lot like C minor major 7, and it's something that you might have practiced doing your arpeggios to go up into the 9 of a C minor chord. And if you play it by yourself, it kind of sounds more to my ear like C minor than it sounds like F7. And it works great because it sort of accentuates that sharp 11, the B natural in this case, in a way that you might not normally hit it if you're thinking of that as a sharp 11 or a sharp 4, which is more of kind of a Lydian sound. In this case, it's the sharp 7 or the natural 7 leading up to the top of a minor chord. So there's a whole bunch of licks that you might have under your fingers already that involve playing minor licks. For instance, you could play that's B flat concert minor kind of lick that sort of outlines the chord very well. But would you play that over a concert E flat 7? Would you play that over the Buddy? Well, try it sometime. You might find that it has a really cool sound and you're sort of accentuating notes in different ways. Even though it's still part of the same chord scale, it's totally interchangeable. So this isn't exactly rocket science, but I think it's really cool to point out, and I see examples of this all over the place. Sorry, it's a little bit saxophone heavy for my examples, but I tend to have a lot more of these transcriptions and books in my library. If you have cool examples of this that you've come across, feel free to send them to me. Comment below if you have any questions. And like and subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys on the next video.